on you. So I think maybe it's a good idea because of the size of this audience that we can have this as a somewhat informal presentation and discussion. So if people have comments or questions throughout the presentation, then I really want to encourage you to express yourself and don't filter your comments, right? I think this is a good forum for people to share their perspectives, their ideas, their concerns, whatever it may be. I'm certainly not going to be offended, and I hope that people here would all have an open mind. With that being said, I think I'd like to tell you a little bit about CAIR. So CAIR, as we mentioned, the Council on American-Islamic Relations, we're sort of like the NAACP or the ACLU for Muslims. The organization was founded in, I think, 1994, and at that time, Arnold Schwarzenegger was coming out with a movie, I think it's called True Lies, and in the movie, they depict Arabs and Muslims like in just this sort of like one-dimensional like villain caricature. And Muslims in America at that time were just upset. It's like again and again and again, Muslims are portrayed in this way. So they started CAIR initially just to do an awareness campaign that, you know what, Muslims aren't really all, packing guns and, obsessed with whatever. They really were just sort of just like everybody else, having a wide range of political and theological ideas. After CAIR was founded, in the next year, we handled our first case of what we call hijab discrimination, where a Muslim woman was either fired or demoted simply because she wanted to wear a headscarf. And this kind of case is something that we deal with, I would say, on a daily basis at CAIR. Someone is not, whatever it is, some kind of harassment, some kind of overt discrimination based on religious garb. Now, we kind of focus on two things. So some of our work is reactive, right? Things happen, we take on cases for people, hate crimes happen, we address a lot of that kind of things. But also our work is somewhat proactive. We really don't just want to be commenting about things that already happened. We want to give our community tools so that they can, improve the situation for Muslims and also just be more involved in civic society. One example is something that we call Muslim Day at the Capitol. We took Muslims from all different communities in New York, we put them on a bus, we took them up to Albany, and on that bus ride we gave people training. What do you say to your elected officials? What is lobbying? What's the process like? We went to the Capitol, we met with a wide variety of Democratic, Republican, all kinds of representatives, and we lobbied them for issues that were important to us. And this kind of work, I think, is really the more important work of our organization, because the Muslim community in New York does have a high number of immigrants who may know how the political structures or lack of structures in their countries work, but we really wanted to get people involved in the politics and whatever it is in life in New York. With that being said, a little bit about myself. I'm not a scholar of religion. I'm a person who works with a nonprofit organization. I think I may have a unique perspective because our organization, although it defends the rights of Muslims, it's not, you don't have to be a Muslim to work in CAIR. And CAIR doesn't have a particular Muslim religious identity. It's not a Sunni organization. It's not a Shia organization. It's not, we're broad. We don't judge on the religious adherence or lack thereof of the cases that we take on. And I think for that reason, we have a unique opportunity to meet Muslims from really all different walks of life, all different cultures, all different ideas, and a lot of that has shaped what I'm going to say today. Also, I want to apologize to anybody in advance if I make an error, if I misrepresent something that's not my intent. I think it seems to me that this audience is somewhat mixed, and so I just want to give a clear picture. But if I get my ayat wrong or whatever it is, feel free to correct me and we'll go from there. So my first question is, what makes a person a Muslim? And this is really a question, so if anyone, you seem to have your hand up there, what would make a person a Muslim?
When they convert.
When they convert.
When it's a shahada.
So they make a declaration of faith. Okay, that would be a part of it. Any other ideas on what would make somebody a Muslim or not? Don't all, put your hands up at once. Really, that's all we got? Yes, sir.
To be born into Islam.
You could be born into it. I suppose you could be, but I don't necessarily think that you could be born into a Muslim family. That doesn't mean that you're going to be Muslim, but that's probably a factor for sure. Any other comments on it? What about actions? Do your actions make you a Muslim or not? Sister, what do you think?
Well, there's like 5 pillars of Islam, right? And how you act on those kind of like implement how strict you are with your religion and how you interpret Islam within your life.
Okay, so I think you're sort of making an argument that if you're following the 5 pillars of Islam, then you're a Muslim. Correct? Are you sure about that? Okay, fine. So this is a really interesting question. Even Muslims themselves talk about this. What really makes you a Muslim is your beliefs, right? No one is a Muslim based on their actions, per se. For example, all Muslims believe in God. We believe that there's only one God. We believe in prophets. We believe in a day of judgment. We believe in an afterlife. We believe in angels. We believe in devils. We believe in these things. Upon your beliefs, and only your beliefs, would you really be able to say, I'm a Muslim or not, right? I'm not trying to put people in or out of Islam, but if someone would say, there is no God, I don't subscribe to that ideology, that person could not be a Muslim. Their parents could be Muslim, their best friend could be Muslim, but if you don't believe in God, you're not a Muslim. That would probably be the core tenet of Islam. Now, you had referenced 5 pillars of Islam, right? Now, I'm not trying to say that the rules, the tenets, the actions that Islam ascribes to people are not important, but you're not a Muslim or not a Muslim because you do or don't do those things. You're a Muslim really based upon your beliefs. And I think that's a really central point. The 5 pillars. Someone want to give me the 5 pillars of Islam? Now she's shy. So we had one already, a declaration of faith. The first pillar of Islam is basically saying, I believe in God, there's one God, and I believe that Muhammad is his messenger. Any other pillars? We got one down. Yes, sir?
There's the pilgrimage to Mecca.
Yes, there we go. Excellent. The Hajj. The Hajj. Very good, very good. Man, so also, who here is a Muslim? By a raise of hands. All right. So, that's good. So we're not even half Muslims. So I think we're like tied right now. Like people who aren't Muslim and people who are Muslim giving an answer. Muslims, are you going to let that happen? You're not Muslim based on your not knowing what the 5 pillars are. Yes, sir?
Fasting in Ramadan.
Fasting in Ramadan. Very good. Fasting for 30 days. Excellent. Do we have any other pillars?
Zakat.
Zakat. What is zakat?
It's the giving.
It's giving charity based on a percentage of the wealth that you have. Yes? More or less? Okay, so we have declaration of faith, fasting in Ramadan, giving charity, taking the pilgrimage, and is that 5?
It's prayer.
Oh, and prayer. Praying 5 times a day. Thank you. So I mentioned prophets, right? And I use prophets plural. I think that there's sometimes a perspective that Muslims only believe that Muhammad is a prophet. So to be really clear, we don't worship Muhammad. There is absolutely no worshiping of Muhammad. And if you did worship Muhammad, it would actually be a problem because you're only supposed to worship God in this religion. Muhammad is one prophet, but he's a prophet in a chain, a lineage of prophets. So in our belief system, Jesus is a prophet. Abraham is a prophet. So we share a common set of prophets, and we believe that we're part of a broader lineage that shares ideas and cultures and beliefs with Judaism and Christianity. Not to say that every single belief will be the same, but there's pretty much a remarkable similarity in a lot of cases. When Prophet Muhammad was preaching Islam, the simple way to put it is that he was telling people that I came to tell you things that you had already been told before. I'm a reminder. I'm reminding you of things that other prophets in other times had said to people. But he also gave a warning. He was warning people that there will be an accountability for your actions. Whether it happens in this life, God is aware of what you do, and through your good deeds, you may be rewarded for that, and through your bad deeds, you will be punished for that. And this is the core central part of Islam that I would say that most Muslims would agree upon. It's a subtle thing, next thing I'm going to say, but I think that this is probably the most pervasive misconception about Islam and Muslims, that Islam and Muslims are kind of like a monolith, right? That every Muslim is the same, that every Muslim thinks the same way, has the same political ideas, has the same theological ideas. I would say that Islam has a remarkable diversity of belief, really across the board. And anybody who suggests that that's not the case is probably misleading you in one way or another. And this is a theme that I think hopefully we'll touch upon as we go through this presentation again and again, giving examples of diversity of beliefs amongst Muslims. So maybe the next way that we could do this sort of a lightning round aspect of this presentation is what I'm going to call keywords, right? Some words are really straightforward, and others are words that you'll see in the media and are used to try to portray Muslims one way or the other. So first, we'll start with some simple ones. Islam. What does Islam mean? Brother who picked me up from the gate, what does Islam mean? So that's just an easy one. Okay.
I mean, to me, what does Islam mean?
I mean, what does the word mean?
Peace.
Peace. So peace is a common interpretation of the word. Submission is a common interpretation of the word. All these words are Arabic words, and the Arabic language is more precise. They say over time, languages tend to become a little more simplified and a little more efficient in a sense. The Arabic language is really rich, really deep. There's so many words, and I think that Islam may not have like a direct, like there's some English language word that exactly means it, but you'll see that people may interpret it as someone who submits to the will of God, or maybe that's the definition of Muslim. So Muslim is sort of like Islam with mu in front of it, and I think mu is it means, I apologize to anyone who speaks Arabic, because probably every time I say an Arabic word, they're like, oh my ears hurt or something. But mu basically means like one who does, right? So a Muslim is one who does Islam, one who practices this faith. Salam, so you translated salam earlier. Salam is a greeting that Muslims give. It pretty much means like peace be upon you. There's like a, salam alaikum, that people will say. So it's sort of like right back at you. I mean, that's probably the worst translation ever, but it's, peace be upon you, and peace also be upon you. Allah. Allah simply means God. I read on the internet that a lot of people think Muslims worship some kind of like moon god or some kind of other god. We absolutely don't believe in any kind of other god. There's just one, and we believe it's the same one that other people of other faiths are also worshiping. Sometimes people get stuck on this idea that these words, like, just mean like madrasa. One time I was at an event, and this guy came up to me and he says, "They're going to build a madrasa in my town." Right? And I was like kind of taken aback, right? I said, well, your town has a lot of madrasas in it already, right? And he was like, what are you talking about? And madrasa just means school. It just means school. It doesn't have any special meaning beyond that. And he was like, you don't understand. They're going to build a madrasa. And no matter how you pronounce it, it still means school, But I don't think madrasa is one that you'll typically see as some of our lightning rod terms. Jihad. Has everyone in this room heard the word jihad? What is jihad? Anybody? Anyone want to take this one? What is jihad?
It means to struggle.
To struggle.
For the will of God.
Okay, very good. Any other interpretations of the word jihad? Come on, non-Muslims. You guys knew the pillars. You don't want to comment on jihad? Red shirt?
Isn't it usually like words that the media puts a negative connotation on. I don't know how to describe it, but like, we'll say like they have like a jihad against something.
Yes, yeah. So jihad definitely has to be, I think, the word from the Quran that has been given like the most ominous and of portrayals in American media. But the sister's right. Jihad really means struggle. It is a unique kind of struggle. I think that we can all agree that there's difficulty in life. Jihad is a little bit more than that. Jihad would be that there's something that you believe you need to do it. It's going to be better for you. It's going to be better for your family. It's going to be better for your community. But it's not coming easy to you, right? And jihad can be, it's very personal, right? One person's jihad, something could be easy for someone else, but maybe there's someone who is prone to lying, right? They find that it's easy in situations just to tell a lie. Maybe it's a little lie or whatever it is. And their jihad, because they know this is wrong, and they know it's not really helping them in life, their jihad could be telling the truth, right? Now, to the extent that jihad has been a term associated with war, I don't think it's difficult to understand that if you're a person who's a soldier and your job is to fight, that's probably something you don't want to do. It's dangerous. I really doubt that people see this as something they want to do. So to the extent that Muslims have been involved in wars, it could be a type of jihad that you have to wake up, you have to train, you have to do these things that you don't want to do. But it may be, unfortunately, something better for your people, for your community, depending on the circumstance. Sharia. Sharia is really interesting. In the United States, I think there's something like 27 different states where they have tried to pass a law saying that Sharia law could never be used in U.S. courts. And the weird thing about these bills is that they're kind of a straw man. You guys know what a straw man is, right? So you're saying you're going to make a law that says that we can't have Sharia law in courts to somehow obstruct me, but I'm not calling for that, right? You really, I don't know that I've ever seen like a press release come out from some major Muslim organization being like, let's get that Sharia passed. Like that's our main objective. What Sharia is like a codification, right? So we have the Quran, that's our book. What Sharia really looks to do is to look at rules that would be either overt or maybe implied by the Quran and codify these rules so that they could be adhered to. And these rules, some people think of Sharia as it means like chopping someone's head off or something like that, but Sharia is really broad. Sharia is not cheating someone in a financial transaction. Sharia is visiting someone who's sick in the hospital. Sharia is extremely broad. So even though no one that I'm ever aware of in the history of the United States is calling for Sharia as like a punishment system in the United States, it is threatening to us that Sharia would be outlawed because it would imply that if Sharia is very expansive, that somehow just having this faith and being in this country would be committing a crime. That's one layer of why you'll see Muslims in opposition to these so-called anti-Sharia bills. The other reason that we may be in opposition to it is we don't think that it's necessary to single out Muslims and be like, your laws can't be, why us? Why not everybody? Why not make a law that's just universal? If you want to take like a secular opinion on it, all religious laws would be banned or something like that. But we just don't feel like it's necessary to single out Muslims and their religious beliefs and make prohibitive laws about it. Fatwa, right? What's a fatwa? Sister in the hijab over there. What's a fatwa?
It's a religious ruling.
Religious ruling. Okay, excellent. A fatwa is a religious ruling. Typically, fatwas are not, like when you hear some kind of outrageous, like somebody issued this fatwa, typically my understanding of fatwas is that's not usually how they're applied. Usually a fatwa is like a really specific case. Some people are really concerned about how they're living their life, and they want to live their life in a way that God is going to be happy with them. So they'll go to a religious leader and they'll ask a very specific question, right? And I have an instance that I thought was really interesting that I'll share with you. So there was a couple, husband and wife, who would pray together, as typically husband and wife would do, who were Muslim. But his wife had a kind of obsessive compulsive disorder, and when she would go to wash before prayers, it could take her like 1 to 2 hours to complete washing. She would think that she had gotten washed, and then she'd start thinking, oh, maybe I didn't, let me just start over again. And for him, it would, I mean, for anybody, it would be difficult, but in his case, he felt that, a prayer is going to happen at a certain time, and it was like an obstruction for his family to pray together, that his wife, unfortunately, had this sort of, mental ailment, right? So he went to his religious leader, he explained the situation, and in this case, a fatwa was given, not to the community, but to these individuals, actually advising his wife that they don't need to pray together, that she doesn't always have to pray, that if she has the time or something like that. So this is not for all Muslims, this is not for all people. This would be a very, very, very specific instance of like an exception or something. And these people's intent was to try to implement these things, but in a way that wouldn't make their life, overly burdensome. I think most fatwas you'll see like that. Every once in a while there's a fatwa, like I remember there's like a fatwa on cell phones, right? And beepers. I think when beepers, I know you guys are probably too young, I don't know, but when I was in high school, like beepers were like this like new thing, and like very few people had them. And if you had a beeper, people were like, oh, that's a drug dealer. Yeah, he's got a beeper. So I think there was like a fatwa about beepers and cell phones, and I think the fatwa about cell phones was basically like, yeah, if you're concerned if you can have a cell phone or not, it would be about what you're using it for. If you're using it to sell drugs, don't get it. It's forbidden for you. But if you're using it for normal communicative purposes, that's fine. Sometimes when new technologies come out, people would want a fatwa about it because clearly the Quran didn't have any sentences or ayats that deal with cell phones and the appropriateness of them. On Facebook today, I posted like, I'm going to give this talk about misconceptions about Islam. What should I talk about? What do people need to know about? And resoundingly, the #1 issue that people brought up was Muslim garb, Muslim clothing, right? So definitely I think that's something we should talk about. In Islam, there's something called the Sunnah, right? Does anyone want to give me a good definition of Sunnah? Come on, guys, back.
Tradition of the Prophet.
What's that?
The tradition of the Prophet.
The tradition of the Prophet. Okay, fair enough.
If you can turn the mic on because it's when the heat comes on.
Turn it on? No, we have no mic. I'm sorry. You've got to come closer, brother. So in Islam, there's this concept. We take our religion from the Quran, which is it's not just a book. I mean, it's more than that. But essentially, you could look at it as a book, and it's certainly things are stated in there. But there are things that are not stated in there, like praying 5 times a day. You can go into the Quran and find a number of different entries in there that pertain to prayer. But I'm pretty sure that there's not an actual ayah that's like, pray 5 times a day. Muslims took that by observing the way that the Prophet conducted himself, how he led himself and how he led Muslims in his lifetime, right? It was very clear that they had established prayer in a certain way. So even though that's not necessarily completely or explicitly in the Quran, it's well established that that's something that that Muslims are bound to do or responsible for. The reason I bring up the Sunnah is because a lot of the rules, a lot of the ways that Muslims live their life are going to be from the Sunnah. But the Sunnah is also a little bit nuanced, right? This is definitely sound like a weird story, but during the life of the Prophet, there was a person who, when they would go on trips, he had this like preference to relieve himself in a certain location. And people asked him like, why? What's going on with this? And he said, well, I know that the Prophet had gone to the bathroom there, I'm going to follow his example, and I'm going to go to the bathroom there too. And then the companions were like, okay, look, we are taking our religion, we're taking a lot of things from the Prophet, but this is not one of them, right? And so clearly in Islam, we have to have not necessarily a literalist interpretation of things, because when Islam came about, this was a different time, a different culture, right? We have to look at the intent of things. How about miswak? You guys know what miswak is? Right? Miswak is like, it's like this stick. I mean, it's a pretty cool thing. I have to admit, I'm kind of into miswak, but it's a stick that you could sort of break it apart and brush your teeth with it. And on top of this stick, like turning into a brush, it also has some kind of, I don't know, chemicals, what kind of substances in it that actually like naturally clean your teeth. So there are Muslims today, because the Prophet, because other Muslims would clean their teeth with this thing, they're like, miswak. This is sunnah, right? And really, and I apologize that, I don't want to offend anyone who may have a different opinion, but really the sunnah is like having a fresh breath, right? That's a good thing, and having a clean mouth, right? How you necessarily get there, a toothbrush is not like forbidden or haram or whatever it is. You don't have to use miswak. So the higher purpose of miswak is cleanliness of your breath, so you don't offend your friends, Modesty would be a very high value in Islam. And I mean, I really can't emphasize enough how much modesty is an attribute that Muslims think is important and that they value. And one of the ways, but it's one of many, many ways that a person could be modest, would be in how they dress. And this is where you're going to find the hijab, but it's not just for women. It's not like women were singled out by Islam to say that only you have religious guidance on how you should dress yourself. There are specific parts of the Quran that talk about how a man should dress, and like we have to always wear pants that are below our knees and things of that nature. So, I mean, I guess I can go into it maybe a little bit further, because some people might say, well, if the higher purpose is modesty, and certainly a lot of Muslims are wearing hijab, why aren't all Muslim women wearing hijab, right? It could be confusing, right? And I think that, and I'm not going to give a fatwa on this, right? I'm not going to give a religious ruling. I'm not qualified to do so, but I'm going to just highlight that this is probably a great example of Muslim diversity of opinion. There are people who may even be here today who could make a very compelling argument that Muslim women should wear this hijab, and perhaps it's mandatory. And there are other, most likely, hopefully women, on both sides of this argument, who would say, no, we don't think it's mandatory, we think it's like this and like that. And this is encouraged. In Islam, thinking about things, discussing things is encouraged. We're not trying to be a faith of people who blindly follow things in an ignorant way. Are people satisfied with that? I'm always sensitive about giving like a hijab talk, meaning that I don't wear hijab. Does anyone want to add to what I said about modesty and the hijab and why people may or may not?
Another thing is about the hijab, it's not just like an outer appearance too, it's also like a hijab on the inside, like modesty on the inside as well. And I just feel like that's also like a topic that never really gets discussed when people are talking about the hijab. And I feel like even if you wear a scarf on your head, that's not the only thing about hijab. Like also you have to dress modestly everywhere else. Like you can't just wear a scarf and then like wear like I don't know, leggings and or shorts with it. Like if you're gonna wear, if you don't wear a scarf, you can also dress modestly, and it goes both ways too.
Okay, so you're kind of emphasizing different aspects of modesty and being modest in other ways and so on and so forth. I think also another aspect of Islam that has to come into this is niyyah, or intentionality, right? If you're doing something that's supposed to have a good purpose, but you're doing it for a bad reason, then that's not the sunnah, right? That's not something that, in a Muslim system of belief that you're going to get rewarded for. And I guess I would also talk about status, right? So clearly there are people who have really they want to wear certain kinds of clothing or certain things like that, right? But really, it's God who knows a person's intent, right? And I think that, I think it was the last sermon of the prophet where he really emphasized equality, right? He was saying that, you know, an Arab is not better than a non-Arab, and a non-Arab is not better than an Arab, and a white person is not better than a black person, and a black person is not better than a white person. That, you know, we're basically equal, except in ways that really only God would know about. And I think that that's probably another, you know, core thing about Islam that, you know, really this equality and getting into misconceptions, right? I think, sorry to just hop around, but I think there's a common misconception that if you're wearing a hijab, that you're like oppressed, that you really wished that you didn't have to wear this thing, but someone is coercing you to do this, right? And I don't want to say that Muslims, like anybody, as an individual, would be beyond coercing someone to do something, right? Obviously, people of all faiths are involved in coercing people to do things. But I have personally not met ever a sister in the United States who wore hijab under coercion. Meanwhile, I have met many sisters who either wore hijab in secret because their parents actually disapproved of it and it was their choice, or you know, people who actually had like conflicts with their parents because they just didn't share this sort of belief about modesty and hijab and what it means. Any questions about modesty or anything that I've said before we get sort of into the next section of the talk? All right, we're good. So I definitely want to, you know, really kind of open the floor to talk about, you know, really any topic that anyone wants to bring up. But I did think it's important to look into why. You know, why are Muslims portrayed the way they are in the media? You know, why are things the way they are, right? And I certainly don't think that, you know, I have all the answers, but there's a lot of interesting things that you can look into. So, for example, there's a documentary called Real Bad Arabs. Has anyone seen this? Real Bad Arabs? And you gotta watch it. So it's not real like R-E-A-L, it's real, R-E-E-L-E, like a movie reel. And in this documentary, it goes through 100 years of Hollywood history, looking at how Muslims, and Arabs in particular, were portrayed in American films. And one thing that's like shocking is that there's no instance, I mean, at the time of this film at least, of an Arab or Muslim being portrayed in a film ever as a family man who loves his children. If an Arab or a Muslim is in a film, like there's like a particular role, like you gotta like put on crazy headgear, you gotta like carry a gun, and that's pretty much the only part that you can get as a Muslim. And certainly that's something that, you know, Muslims are trying to address and trying to get into all different kind of fields. But you know, I think without a doubt, media shapes the way people think, what people perceive. If you've never, ever, if you've seen tons of movies where Muslims are portrayed as like these evil villains, you might, whether you consciously think so or not, start to just perceive Muslims that way. So it's certainly important for us as Muslims to really push into media and try to get different kinds of roles and different kinds of programs, or whatever it is, to break these stereotypes. There's also, you know, since 9/11, there's been sort of like an industry that you know, we oftentimes call the Islamophobia industry. Whether you realize it or not, there are groups, there are individuals who have as a mission statement that, you know, they're going to you know, tell the truth about Islam, they're going to expose Islam and Muslims, we're trying to take over, we're trying to do this or that. And our organization recently did the most comprehensive study ever on this industry. And we were looking at, you know, who are these people, where do they get their money from? And I mean, you could download it from our website, you could learn more about it, but the takeaway from it is pretty interesting. One of the main people who's in New York, and I never name these people, because when I name them, like on the video, they're gonna put on their website, they're gonna raise more money, because, you know, I'm making them seem important. They're really not that important. But one of them who's in New York doesn't even have a high school diploma, which is fine, you know, I barely got a high school diploma, but she doesn't have one, and she's making at least a 6-figure salary. being the head of a nonprofit organization that she has formed, that she put herself as the president of, that she gave herself a 6-digit salary for, that puts bus ads up, but raises tons and tons of money. And the fact of the matter is, I don't really think a lot of these people in this industry are ideologically motivated, right? Some of the people who give them money may believe, oh man, I better give these people money, otherwise, you know, this and that's going to happen. But these people, I mean, they know Muslims. They've actually studied this stuff enough to know that, you know, I do think that Islam has some great qualities to it, but I think that Muslims are, you know, more or less similar to other people. There's not like this vast conspiracy theory that they portray, but they are just making a lot of money, and that's really their motive. And it's not that hard, unfortunately, to do this. To solidify this point, there's an author who wrote a book called The Muslim Mafia, and this book was written maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, and I wouldn't say it was like a bestseller, but it did pretty well. He recently has come out and said that he's not going to deal with this issue anymore, that he realized that all the people involved in it, you know, he thought he was doing a sincere thing, but all the people involved in it are just trying to cash in, and he just doesn't want to be associated with it, so he's taken on other issues that are more legitimate. Yes?
In addition, about media, how many people in here are Catholic? Can you raise your hand?
Wow.
Okay, yeah, that's great. In the early 19th century, when immigration to the United States started, a lot of it was the coming of the Irish to America. A similar campaign against Catholics actually happened, where they said, you know, these Catholics are coming to our country. They want to take it over. They want to make the whole United States Catholic. Was that Catholics' intention? Absolutely not. But nobody believed that because of what the media was telling them.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I think there's kind of a history, right? It's like an unfortunate story of immigration in the United States. There's like waves of different types of immigrants, and there's some people say, well, you know, you guys are new to this country, and then you have to just go through this. Everyone has to go through this. But there's some flaws in the narrative as it pertains to Muslims, right? So first off, where are Muslims from? That's the question I think is important. Where do Muslims come from? Like, guy in the red. Don't think about it too much, man. Where do you think? Where do Muslims come from?
For some reason, I always think of Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. Okay, there we go. Guy chewing gum. Black sweatshirt. You. Where do Muslims come from? Afghanistan. Okay. Yes.
Indonesia has the biggest Islamic population.
There we go. So Indonesia has more Muslims than any other country, but no one ever says Indonesia. You know, this is probably another typical myth about like the population of Saudi Arabia is I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's pretty minuscule. They're really, you know, if all Muslims came from Saudi Arabia, there just wouldn't be that many Muslims. I mean, Muslims come from all over the world. East Asia, Central Asia, Europe, and how about Muslims who were taken to the United States as slaves during the slave trade? There's speculation about this, right? About maybe as much as 40% of those people who were taken as slaves were Muslim, and they themselves, their children, their children's children have been living here for a long time. Like Islam didn't just like show up on a plane, you know, 20 years ago, and so like Muslims just kind of popped up. Another group that is certainly undercounted is the what sometimes is called the indigenous African American Muslim population. In New York, I mean, there's like counting Muslims is like a complicated, nuanced thing, but the percentage is counted, I think, anywhere from on the low end, about 30%, and on the high end, probably more like 50%. But usually when people think about Muslims, they're thinking Arabs or something like that. But the place that we're living in, so many Muslims are African American. I think probably the fastest growing would be South Asian, and then certainly there are Arabs as well. You really can't, you know, just look at a person and say, oh, that's definitely a Muslim, right? It's happened to me, like, actually just recently I was in Penn Station, and I saw this woman, she had like a whole black thing on, and black head, and I was like, salam, sister, and she was like a nun, you know, but and she just threw me off. Maybe she's from a different country or something, I didn't see what I expected. It's really difficult to know like who's a Muslim and who's not, even by names, right? Certain names, you go, oh, that's definitely a Muslim. Well, maybe they're just a person, a Christian person who, lived in the Middle East or whatever it is. So, like, your name could be, Muhammad, whether you're Muslim or not, especially if you come from countries like Egypt and things like that. I think most of what I have to say, I've said. I was tempted. I want to talk about some of like the internal conflicts of that Muslims, like the Muslim community, faces here in New York. Because just like any community, right? I think every community has different kind of growing pains, different kind of challenges. One challenge that we definitely have is Muslims being like politically engaged, and that's something that our organization is really focusing on. Getting people to vote, getting people to write letters to congressmen. People, it's a little bit of an uphill battle, but it's certainly important to do. We have a little bit of a conflict, which I might describe as like culture versus faith. It's certainly kind of nuanced, but people who may have come from a particular country where everybody's Muslim may sometimes confuse their customs with what the faith is. They may be advocating for a certain kind of thing that is indicative of their culture, but not of Islam. One of the projects that we sometimes take up is a project about mosques and female inclusion. So females absolutely should be included in mosques. Whatever resources they have there should be the equivalent to what men would have. This is like pretty straightforward, but there do exist. I'm not going to lie about it, right? Probably sisters here could back me up without a doubt. Mosques that are not properly addressing the needs of sisters, either not fully including them, not keeping their space clean, or whatever it is. This is a problem of our community, But it's not. I wouldn't say that it's indicative of our religion, where there's any aspect of our religion that's calling for that. It's the shortcomings of people who are not administrating their mosques properly. So, is there any topic that I should really cover that I'm not covering? Guy with a sweatshirt and cool hat, what do you got? What do you want people to know about? What was this thing that people circulated about?
Okay, well, I think a lot of things in the Quran are written, in a certain language and in certain contexts. So a lot of things, we had a flyer that was handed out. It took these things out of context. So obviously if let's say you read Shakespearean text and you read the entire thing, but you only read one line of Macbeth. I don't know, you pick one line. You're going to be like, what the hell's going on with the rest? You don't know what's happening. So same thing, if you're actually curious, so they're handing these out, but a lot of things are taken out of context because if you read one line of any paragraph, you're not going to know what's going on in the top and the bottom.
I like what you said. Has anyone ever heard of this book? It's a recent book. I think it was a bestseller called A Year of Living Biblically. Am I Catholics? Never heard of this book, A Year of Living Biblically? So a guy, I think he's a writer from New York, he decided that he's going to go through the Bible and he's going to make a list of every single rule in the Bible, and for a year he's going to follow every rule. Right? This guy's laughing about it. I don't know, what all the rules were, but he described a lot of challenges, right? Of like how he had to dress, things he had to do, and I was kind of stricken a little bit when he has a TED Talk if you don't want to read the book. I was kind of surprised that, wow, this is interesting. It seems like if you want to live every rule of the Bible, you'd have to do a heck of a lot of things that Muslims certainly don't have to do. It seems like the Bible has a lot of rules in it. One of them that was kind of humorous was about stoning adulterers. Apparently, in the Bible somewhere, there's an entry that says that you should take it upon yourself to stone, throw stones at adulterers, right? And of all the rules, he was kind of checking off things that he had done dietarily, dress-wise, and things like that. And he said that one time he was in, I think it was in Washington Square Park, Central Park, and he got to talking to someone about what he's doing and this and that. And they said, well, is there any is there any rule in the Bible that you didn't get to do? And he goes, there's one. I haven't yet had the ability to stone an adulterer. And the guy said, well, I have great news for you. I'm an adulterer. And he said, wow, do you mind? So he threw stones at him. Obviously, this is kind of a cultural, societal experiment, but I think it just goes to show that anyone who's going to take an overly literal perspective on their faith without giving thought to things might find themselves doing things that are unnatural or weird. My hope really for Islam and Muslims is that there'll be a time when these talks are like really unnecessary. That people are like, yeah, my neighbor's Muslim, I know about it, like he eats this kind of food, he wears this kind of hat, yep, no big deal. It's not a big concern, but we're really not there yet. I remember about 2 years ago, it was the 200th anniversary of Darwin. I don't know if his life or his death or something like that. And I was listening to NPR, and do you guys know Charles Darwin?
Yeah.
All right, good. So, they had this talk about evolution, and they were going to have everybody's opinion on evolution. A person from every religion. I was like, this is great, let's see what the opinions are. They had a Catholic guy, they had a Jewish guy, they had a Hindu person, they had this Buddhist monk. And I was like, cool, wow, who did they pick from the Muslim community? Nobody, right? This isn't like Fox, this is like NPR who excluded Muslims from this discussion as if we don't have anything to say about evolution. It's kind of a frustration that Muslims are kind of sort of ushered out into the media to make a comment about terrorism. We don't care about the economy, we don't care about healthcare, we don't care about jobs. We only have this one opinion about this one thing. So that's really what I hope will change, because I believe that there is a unique Muslim perspective on just about every issue. Evolution, for sure. In the Quran, it says that people who sort of rest and contemplate science and the world are people who increase in their appreciation for what God has created. And I think that's probably another interesting contrast in a sense that some religions have been said, oh, they have a science problem or something like that. And that's not a problem that Islam has. We're fully interested to learn as much as possible about science because it doesn't challenge our faith. The more we learn, the more we're like, wow, God is great. He created this, he created that, he created so much that we're still learning about. So I think I pretty much said what I had to say. Any last questions about Saudi Arabia, about whatever it is?
This is a judgment-free zone, so if none of us are scholars, but if you have any questions or have any comments you want to make, please feel free.
Should I get the Muslims to leave the room? We're gonna have Yes?
I don't know a lot about the history of Muslims, but you mentioned prophets, plural.
Yes.
Why do they uphold Muhammad above all the other prophets?
So that's great. You have just given us a misconception. Yes. Thank you. Muslims do not hold Muhammad above any other prophet. The prophets have an equal status, right? If you have this ideology, you believe that God chose these people for a specific reason, and that's unique and amazing, and these people struggled and they did incredible things. Muhammad would be included. I think that would be a key difference between someone who's Muslim and not Muslim. If you're Muslim, you say, he's a prophet too. If you're not Muslim, you might say, I don't think so, right? But how many times is Jesus' name in the Quran? It's again and again and again. Mary, Abraham, all of these other prophets. So it's not only do we believe in their status as a prophet, but a lot of the same stories will be more or less repeated in the Quran. Maybe the emphasis, though, I'd say there's certainly an emphasis, and the emphasis is more like a practical thing, right? So in the case of Muhammad, we have his book more or less in the shape that it was in when it was said in the first place, right? So from a matter of precision, if we want to know what God wants us to do, and we think that God picked a number of prophets to pass on his message, it's practical for us to use this book, this prophet, because it's recent, it's detailed, things like that. But we certainly, if you're Muslim, you better love Jesus, because that's part of our faith. Just a small anecdote on this topic. So there's a sister in my community in Westchester where I live who's from Guyana, right? And she was saying, representing for Guyana.
Yeah. Oh no.
There we go. So she's saying that. She was saying that when she grew up, that in Guyana there were like 3 prominent religions, right? There were Muslims, there were Hindu, and there were Christian. I don't know like which Christian, but let's just say they were Christian, right? And she said that the Christians were really kind of like good about making their faith like appealing, right? So she said that when she walked from her house to school, she would have to walk past a mosque, a temple, and a church. But the priest or whoever it was would give candy to the kids. So the kids would go there. They would love to go there. And she went there as a kid. She was Muslim, right? She went there as a kid, and she would hear all the stories and everything. And she really was like, I love Jesus, right? So, and I guess the mosque, her family, whatever it is, they weren't really educating her a lot about Islam. Like she was getting more of an education about Christianity, right? So when she got married, she married this imam who was also in the Westchester area, and she was like, there could be a problem, this is a private discussion, right? And she said, I don't know how you're going to take this, but I really love Jesus. And he was like, that's fine, that's great. So, I hope that's a sufficient answer for you.
Yeah, no, more than sufficient. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir, red shirt.
This may come off as stupid, but like, is there a link between facial hair and Islam?
Yes, is there a link between facial hair and Islam? We'd like to have it. Yeah, that's a great question. So, you're almost there, man. No, so, definitely. So having a beard is considered part of the Sunnah. My understanding of it is that, I apologize if I'm wrong, but I think that there was like a certain way of keeping your beard, and it would be a way of like kind of identifying yourself as a Muslim to other Muslims and things like that. Certainly, this is an aspect of the faith. However, it is not mandatory, because some people just can't grow a beard. I mean, have you seen Muslims from China? I mean, kidding. But yeah, so it's not like a mandatory thing, but it's certainly something that I think a lot of Muslims with a sort of a positive intent think that, I'm gonna wear this beard, and it's an aspect of faith. Such a stupid question. No, it's a good question. Thank you for that question. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, what does Islam make of the very exclusive statements that Jesus would make in Christian scriptures?
So,
does that make sense? Or would they chalk it up to maybe the inaccuracies of the Bible, or that Jesus maybe didn't say those things?
I think, so this is a good question. So if I may restate it or possibly rephrase it a little bit. So
Sure.
What would Muslims or what in Islam would be the opinion of statements made by Jesus that may put Muslims like outside of belief or something like that?
The statements that Jesus made where he proclaimed to be God or to be the Son of God or be the way, the truth,
the Trinity. Right? I mean, there's two concepts, right? But I think so. One concept is
perhaps to the Trinity. Yeah.
Right. So one concept is Jesus God? Right. That would be something. So Islam has an opinion on that, and this is the sincere belief of Muslims that Jesus was a prophet, not God. And sometimes people will say, for example, like in Islam, God has 99 names, right? All these different names about attributes, right? And one of the names is the translation the sustainer, right? So when Jesus dies, right, people would say, well, God doesn't die. Like that would be a quality of God. God is undying, right? But if in some scenario God died, everything would end. If God's not sustaining gravity and particles and everything, it would just end, right? So I don't think, historically there have been some kind of debates, right, between Muslims and Christians and different people on different topics, right? And some Muslims who participated in these debates would later say that they regretted participating in it, that there's not like, when these debates happen, it's not like people walk away being like, oh, wow, you know. First, it's not like some kind of mass conversion one way or the other, right? But basically, it leads to what people sometimes call convincer resistor, right? Like if I try to convince you to do something, you may resist me because I'm pushing too hard, right? So some of those speakers they'll love to participate in some kind of interfaith event or some kind of, like, let's say we do like Habitat for Humanity, and it's like half MSA and half Christian student group or whatever it is. I mean, that's a perfect way for, I think, Muslims and Christians to work together. But if you do want to get into like a theological thing, right? So yeah, so Muslims do not believe that Jesus is God, and the Trinity is also another concept that is, you know, not believed by Muslims.
The resurrection as well.
Resurrection? Does someone want to comment on that? Who knows better about this particular? Please.
Actually, Jesus never died to be resurrected. In Islam, Jesus was lifted to the heavens before he was put on the cross. And God replaced Jesus with somebody who did exactly right. So it was, in Islam, we believe that Jesus couldn't be resurrected because he never died. And we believe that he will come again.
That's with the Quran, they count.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also we believe that Jesus spoke at birth, which from what I understand is not in Christianity. We believe that the first word Jesus said was that he is the servant of God.
So, you know, with that being said, and this is my personal stance on it, I don't think that, you know, people were put on this planet to have a faith so they could, like, make other people feel bad or tell them they're wrong, right? And I mean, I'd have to say that that's a problem that we have within our faith, right? We have a lot of Muslims who want to be like, oh, look at you, fellow Muslim, you're supposed to be doing this, this, and that, right? And you're supposed to believe this. And the effect is really damaging, right? To the point that you have some Muslims who have been criticized by other Muslims for aspects of their belief. They've been criticized so much that they actually kind of leave the religion because they can't handle the way that they were treated by people of their own faith, you know? So, you know, hopefully there could be interfaith dialogue or more on this campus around some of the differences and some of the perspectives in a way that will bring people together. Any other comments, thoughts? No? All right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.